We've got even more Madden 23 updates coming very soon, and we already know a handful of things that's going to be changed or added in this upcoming update. Now, about a couple weeks ago, we got the biggest update so far of the year, which actually did provide a lot of good changes for the game. Also gave us some additions to equipment, playbooks, much needed changes in those areas, but we still got more to go as we're only about halfway through the Madden 23 season. And as always, if you never want to miss out on any of these updates and you always want to know exactly what's changing with the game, make sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon on so you don't miss any of these important videos when they go live. Now, with this last update that just passed, one of the biggest surprises was that there were no changes made to the X Factor and Superstar players. This is something that EA typically updates at least a couple times a year, and over the last couple of updates, at some point, this should have been changed because we're at about that point of the year where they normally at least make the first change, and yet we still have not had that done yet. So what that means is the next upcoming update, they're definitely going to finally be changing these a little late in my opinion, as we all thought it was definitely coming with the last update, but there's no way that we're going to be going almost into a new year with no updates to the X Factor and Superstar players. That's just not typically what they do. And the reason this is probably a little bit behind maybe is just because there's been so many bugs with the game this year that they've had to address, especially with franchise mode, so maybe that could be a reason for it, but nonetheless, this could be a pretty big shakeup as we have a lot of outdated Superstar and X Factor players currently in the game. For example, players like Russell Wilson and Tyrann Mathieu will more than likely be losing their X Factor. In fact, for Russell Wilson, I flat out know he will because he's having the worst season of his career, and it's just not something a lot of us saw coming, but they're definitely not going to keep him as an X Factor player going forward. I think he's even under an 80 overall in the actual ratings right now, but he's still an X Factor player, so that's kind of funny. He's in the 70s, but he's one of the 50 best players in the game according to the X Factor database. That's going to be changing. And then you've got some players that are literally MVP candidates like Jalen Hurts and Tua who have nothing. They're not even Superstar players, which is kind of hilarious at this point. Now, in terms of new X Factor players, there's a few names that come to mind. Jamar Chase, because a lot of people thought that he should have been bumped up to that last year, but he's also been injured a little bit lately, so that one is up in the air, but I think they should probably bump him up to X Factor because he should be coming back this week, in fact, and we know when he's healthy, he's one of the best receivers in the league. Saquon Barkley is another player. He's having a very big bounce back year, and right now, he doesn't have anything. He's not even a Superstar player. Now, typically, players do not go from having nothing all the way up to X Factor. That's very rare. It might have only happened once or twice. However, Saquon Barkley is a former X Factor player, so I think if you are a former X Factor player, it's a little bit easier for you to bump right back up to it if you kind of have a return to form season, which has happened for him this year. Some other names that could possibly jump up to X Factor are guys like Darius Slay, who's having one of his best seasons, one of the best corners in the league. Guys like Mark Andrews, who in my opinion should have been an X Factor player last year. And there's probably some other guys I'm forgetting, but that's just off the top of my head. Now, in terms of Superstar players that will be getting abilities, there's a lot more wiggle room here because you can have pretty much as many Superstar players as you want, but you can only have 50 X Factors, at least the way EA does it. And there's a ton of young players especially that have nothing that will definitely be jumping up to Superstar at the very least, like a Jalen Hurts or to a Tagovailoa. I don't think either of them are going to jump straight to X Factor, but who knows? Honestly, who knows with EA, but at the very least, those guys should be jumping up to Superstar and getting some abilities. And for QBs, those are kind of the most important positions in the game in terms of abilities. If your QB has abilities, that makes the team a ton better. Some other guys that could definitely be jumping up are guys like Josh Jacobs, who used to be a Superstar player a year or two ago, kind of fell off just a tad. Now he's really bouncing back, just had a huge game last week, been having a really good year. I think he'll probably jump up to Superstar. Guys like Miles Sanders, who's having his really big breakout season. Jalen Waddle, 2 years in a row, has been a really good receiver. I think he should definitely jump up to Superstar, which would make the Dolphins crazy because you already got Tyreek and you've already got a ton of speed. So if you get Tua and Waddle also having abilities, that would make the Dolphins even that much better in the game. Guys like Patrick Surtain should absolutely be jumping up. I think he's already one of the best corners in the league and he has nothing as it stands right now. And then you've got a lot of rookies, honestly, that have really been showing out. I mean, last year you had a few. This year, you're kind of right back at it. Guys like Chris Olave, Kenneth Walker, Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley, all of those guys could potentially jump up to Superstar players with the way they have played so far. Now, in terms of gameplay, EA already came out right after the last update, and they mentioned a few things that they were looking to further balance and adjust for the new update that's going to be coming soon. Now, I don't remember where they posted it because I couldn't find it, but I remember reading it very shortly after the update. They either had a reply somewhere on Twitter or on their forum somewhere, but they did mention two very important things that have been overpowered to say the least in Madden 23, and that's man coverage and aggressive catching. And depending on what type of player you are, you either think it's OP or you love it because you're able to kind of take advantage of it and you like using those things. Whatever side you fall on, I think we can all agree, if something is meta, if something is being used by predominantly everybody, that's probably because it's a little bit too good, because people typically don't use the things that are average. They only use the things that are the best. And right now that's man coverage and aggressive catching. Man coverage has been very good all year, and I really don't have a problem with it being good. I think there's enough ways to beat man coverage personally, but there are times where it's just a little bit too psychic, and especially with the O-line blocking being so bad this year and man blitzes being very powerful, it is an area that could use a little balance, so it makes sense that they'd be looking into it. I'm just surprised that it's taken them this long into the year to finally look into this, but again, with all of the bugs and glitches in the game this year, I think they've been spending a lot of time addressing that stuff first. Aggressive catching is arguably the best that it's ever been, even going back to Madden 16 when it first entered the game and it was super OP. This year, one-on-one, if you know how to do it a certain way, it's almost pretty much guaranteed for the most part, but it is kind of a necessary evil to the cover zero man blitzes. So if they're going to tweak the man coverage, then naturally you have to tweak the aggressive catching too, because you have to balance both of those things together because they kind of go hand in hand with how they're used this year. There's also more than likely going to be some AP balancing done for MUT. So if you are a MUT player, the ability points that you can spread on your offense and defense, likely there's going to be some balancing there, because usually a few times a year they do some balancing, and I think we're kind of at that point of the year where they need to balance the AP. They could either raise the AP for certain abilities, they could lower them for other abilities, and they can also adjust the total amount of ability points you have on both offense and defense. I think this is about the time of year where they're going to look to start adjusting that as well. In terms of franchise mode, I'm not really sure. Let me know below if franchise mode is still having a ton of issues. I know with this last update and the one before that, they said that they took care of most of the issues that was causing leagues to reset or not be able to progress. They said that they fixed the 32 user glitch for franchise mode. They said that they fixed the draft revert glitch, but again, I don't play franchise mode, so I don't know for sure if those things were fixed. I'm hearing that some people said that they were, but there may be still some leagues and some players that could still be impacted by these problems. So while it might be fixed for a lot of people, maybe it's not fixed for everybody. And if it's not fixed for everybody, then of course they're going to still keep working to try and get that fixed, even though it might be too little too late for a lot of people. But in terms of any additions to franchise mode, I don't think we're getting any additions like we have the past couple years with the post-launch updates, because they didn't say going into this year that they were doing the dedicated franchise mode post-launch updates like previous years. So I think it's more so about fixing any remaining bugs that may be there. I don't expect anything new. Now, in terms of some other stuff, I think player likeness and equipment are still going to be added in this update as well, because almost every update we've gotten this year, we've seen more player likeness added and we've seen more equipment. They've honestly been doing a little bit more of that this year than they did last year, whereas you might only get one update of player likeness and one update of equipment, but it seems like almost every update this year, they have included something for both of those departments, even if it's a small player likeness update, like only 5 new players or, you know, a couple pieces of equipment. It seems like we've gotten at least a little bit of something for both of those in every update, so they may look to continue that, because there's still a ton of player likeness, especially for young players that need to be put in the game, and there's still a ton of equipment that we need in the game. There's still new helmets and new cleats that are not in the game yet, and they seem to be pretty big on getting that stuff in, even though it takes them forever sometimes. They have been consistently putting those new things in, so I think we could see more of that with this update as well. Now, we also just got some huge news regarding the upcoming NCAA football game, and if you want to know more about that, check out this video right here on the screen.